Hey guys, Master Studios here, how you doing? Sorry for not uploading a sentencing video yesterday at the time of me making this video, because yesterday would be Friday. I was just pretty busy on that day, so next week I will be back with another sentencing video, this time going over the sentencing for Mr. E slash Mr. F. And so with that out of the way, let's get into the main video right now. Right now, when it comes to Ninjago, we are getting very close to part 2 of Crystalized, and there's been a lot of predictions that people have been having when it comes to the next half of the season. And so in today's video, I just wanted to go over some predictions that I have when it comes to part 2 of Crystalized. This is going to contain spoilers for every single episode of Crystalized, including the two most recent ones, episodes 13 and 14. So if you haven't seen those episodes yet, there will be spoilers in this video. And with that, let's get into the whole situation. Also, potential spoilers for part 2 of Crystalized. So, the first thing that I want to go over when it comes to predictions is something that relates to the main Crystalized poster, or well, the Part 2 poster. The poster is very clearly modeled after the poster that was used for Avengers Endgame, and so it's led a lot of fans to wonder, will the things that happen in Endgame happen to the characters in Crystalized? This has been a topic that a lot of people have been talking about, mainly in regards to 4 characters given where they are in the poster. Specifically, the Crystal King, Sensei Wu, Pixel, and Lloyd. When it comes to the Crystal King, he's in the exact same spot that Thanos was in, which has led people to wonder, will the Crystal King end up dying? And considering the fact that during the LegoCon trailer, Garmadon specifically said the only way to destroy the Overlord, which does imply that the Overlord is going to die, there's that. Wu and Pixel are put in the exact same places as Iron Man and Black Widow respectively, and considering the fact that during Endgame, both of these characters ended up sacrificing themselves and dying during the events of the movie, it has led some fans to wonder if this is going to happen to Wu and Pixel. And from the way things are looking, I do think this is likely both characters could end up sacrificing themselves, but maybe not necessarily dying. Except for maybe Pixel, I think her chances of dying during Crystallize are a bit more likely compared to Wu's, but we'll have to wait and see. And finally, when it comes to Lloyd, he is put in the exact same position as Captain America. And considering during the events of Endgame, after Steve ended up returning all the Infinity Stones and Thor's hammer, it was revealed that he decided to retire and live out the rest of his life in the past with Peggy Carter. This has led some fans to wonder, could a similar thing end up happening to Lloyd? Mainly the idea of him retiring potentially. And I do feel like this is definitely possible. And I think it will actually happen during the events of Crystallize. It's possible that with all the stress and pressure that it takes to be the Green Ninja, it's possible that by the end of Crystallize, Lloyd will just decide to ultimately retire from being a ninja and choosing to go off and live the rest of his life in the Neverrealm with Akita actually. I see that as being incredibly likely and something that will happen. Especially considering the fact that on Twitter, Tommy Andreasen, the co-creator of the show, and Vincent Tong, Kai's voice actor, have talked about the idea of a send-off happening during the events of Crystallize. And honestly, from the way things are looking, Lloyd definitely seems to be the most likely character who will end up being sent off by the end of the season. And again, if he gets to Steve Rogers' ending where he goes to the Neverrealm to live with Akita for the rest of his life, I could totally see that happening, and I honestly think that would be the best way for them to end Lloyd's story, honestly. Going back a bit though, I want to briefly talk about the Overlord slash the Crystal King. Again, he's put in the exact same position as Thanos, and so it's possible he could end up dying. However, I have a feeling that the Crystal King won't be the only villain who's going to end up dying during the events of this season. I have a feeling it's also likely Harumi will also end up dying during the events of Crystallize. Mainly because of the fact that it was the Crystal King who ended up bringing Harumi back to life, and I have a feeling that the show is probably going to do this thing where, or if the Overlord dies, then so does Harumi because the Overlord was the one who brought her back, and so his power is what's keeping her alive and everything. So, again, it's possible that if the Overlord ends up dying, Harumi will end up dying too, and they will both end up going to the Departed Realm. Another prediction that I have when it comes to Part 2 is the idea of more allies returning. We already seen this a little bit when it comes to Crystalized, mainly with the poster showing off Nelson, Antonia, and Ronan, and Tommy Andreasen also confirmed that Scott's going to be making a return appearance, and during the LegoCon trailer, we saw Racer 7, so it's possible that we can end up seeing more ninja allies make a return during this. With a couple obvious ones, easily going to the people of Shintaro and just seeing Vanya back, considering, well, you know, the Skull Sorcerer is a prisoner of Shintaro, so they'll probably do what they can in order to help them out. Plus, Vanya did promise Cole that she would end up bringing the entire army of Shintaro in case there was some kind of problem, so there's that. I also think it's possible we could maybe see the rest of the Elemental Masters make a return. I'm not entirely sure. And then there's the episode The Return of the Ice Emperor. And the idea is, when it comes to this episode, Zane actually goes to the Neverrealm in order to get allies. Then it would mean that a bunch of the characters from the Neverrealm would actually make a return appearance. Mainly a bunch of the Formlings, Crag, and most importantly, out of all of them, it would have to be Akita who would end up making a return appearance. And considering the fact that during the ending of the Ice chapter, they basically were just setting up Akita to make a return into the show, now I feel would definitely be a really great chance for them to do that, actually. Another thing that I want to talk about is the idea of villains being redeemed. Now, there's three main villains in particular that I want to talk about when it comes to this. The first one being Asphira. Now, I don't think Asphira is flat out going to become a good guy during the events of Crystalized, but I do think she is going to help out the ninja, mainly because of this. With one of the episode descriptions, it says that Lloyd will be able to escape with help from an unlikely ally, and out of all the villains we've seen, Asphira is by far the most likely to be this ally. Mainly because Lloyd was the one who helped Asphira escape once the police showed up at the monastery, and from Asphira's perspective, Lloyd is the first person in thousands of years basically to actually keep their word to Asphira. So she might decide to help out Lloyd a bit by just setting him free and just giving him a bit of a chance to escape from the Oni Temple. I could definitely see that happening. The next villain who I want to go over is Mr. F. And this mainly relates into the idea of Mr. F actually being Echo Zane. For those of you who are a bit confused by this, the original plan was for Mr. E. He was originally going to be the character Echo Zane, who was introduced during Skybound. But the show writers ultimately decided to cut the idea. And something that people have been talking about is the idea of Echo Zane actually being Mr. F. And I do think we could potentially see this, like the writers following through on this idea and making Mr. F Echo Zane, and potentially having his identity revealed during the events of Crystalized. And since Jay and Nia remember the events of Skybound, the two of them, plus potentially the original Zane, might do something in order to try and get Mr. F to fight on their side. And this is something that we could potentially see, although it might not be for super long. Maybe it could end up being something where Echo Zane decides to sacrifice himself after remembering who he truly is and overcoming his evil programming. Either way, I just think it's something that we could see. Finally, the last villain who I want to talk about when it comes to this is Garmadon. When it comes to the ending of Season 10, as well as also some stuff in the Garmadon comics, it's left kind of ambiguous as to what exactly is going to happen to Garmadon and whether or not he's actually going to be going back towards the side of good. And so it's possible that during the events of Crystalized, we might end up seeing more of this, and Garmadon not being super sure as to what side he wants to be on, good or evil. And when it comes to Crystalized, we could theoretically end up seeing Garmadon potentially become a good guy once again, but the question as to whether or not he would become a human is definitely up for debate. Either A, he is going to become a human again, like what happened at the end of Season 2, or the other option is that he will become a good guy, but he will remain in his Oni form. Either option is something that I could see, but I have a feeling that Garmadon could potentially become a good guy at some point during the events of Crystalized, and like a full-blown good guy, and he's not just helping out the ninja so that way he can take over Ninjago later at some point. Now, you may have noticed when it came to the whole situation, there was one villain who I left out when it came to the idea of a redemption story, with that being Harumi. And that's because I already made an entire video talking about the idea of Harumi getting a redemption arc during Crystalized, and in that video, I go into great detail on why Harumi getting a redemption arc would actually be a really bad idea when it comes to Crystalized, and just why it would not work at all. Just seriously, I don't think Harumi should get a redemption arc when it comes to the event into Crystalized. But there is one other thing that I want to talk about though when it comes to Harumi, with it being the idea of her and Lloyd being together. Now, this is something that I also don't think is going to happen when it comes to Crystalized. I highly, highly doubt it. And that's mainly because of Lloyd's arc. Ever since the events of Season 11, Lloyd has been going through this big and massive character arc of him getting over Harumi and moving on from her. And we have seen this in every single season of the Wild Brain era of the show, with the exception of Seabound. And I think it's possible that when it comes to Crystalized, we will actually see the conclusion to that arc, with Lloyd realizing how much of a terrible person Harumi is, and fully letting go of the idea of Harumi potentially just changing or becoming a good guy, with him ultimately realizing that Harumi can't change, and that she is a villain. And we could even potentially see a reverse of a situation that happened during Season 8 actually, with the idea being that if Harumi does get redeemed and she wants to be with Lloyd for some reason, even though she hates him, we can end up getting a situation where Harumi has feelings for Lloyd, but Lloyd doesn't have feelings for Harumi because of all the bad and terrible stuff that she did to him and just how she was a bad person in general. Lloyd wouldn't choose to forgive Harumi. And to be honest with you guys, I wouldn't blame him for this at all. Lloyd has absolutely no reason to forgive Harumi after all the bad and terrible stuff she did, not just to him, but in general. Just, again, that just makes sense. Plus, also, recently, Tommy Andreessen, the co-creator of the show, basically just debunks the whole idea of Lloyd and Harumi actually getting together during the event into Crystalized, mainly with a tweet where a fan asked him about the idea of the two of them getting together, and Tommy Andreessen essentially debunked the idea by pointing out the fact that Harumi is a terrible person who doesn't like Lloyd and just... I've been saying this for months, basically, and it's a big reason as to why I consider Lloyd and Harumi's relationship to be pretty bad, because, again, Harumi is a terrible person who very clearly does not like Lloyd, and I have made multiple videos talking about how bad their relationship is, because just, it's so toxic and abusive. Also, at some point during Crystalized, I'd imagine that some character is going to have to bring up the fact that Lloyd and Harumi are related to each other, because, you know, that happened during Season 9. During the Season 9 episode 2 Lies One Truth, Garmadon adopted Harumi as his child, making her his daughter, and by extension, Lloyd's sister. So either Harumi herself or Garmadon is going to have to bring up the fact that, you know, Lloyd and Harumi are siblings and are related to each other. So, you know, there's that. Finally, one last prediction that I have when it comes to Part 2 of Crystalized is what's going to happen when it comes to the Dragon Ninja. For those of you who aren't too sure about this, the idea is that when it comes to the original 4 ninja, they will end up getting golden dragon powers, and the idea is like either they will use their powers to just summon a massive 4-headed golden dragon that Lloyd will end up riding, or the 4 of them will end up transforming into a giant 4-headed golden dragon that Lloyd will use to defeat the Crystal King. And the big question that a lot of fans have been wondering about is the idea of, if this is the ninja transforming into this dragon, can it be reversible? Or will the ninja end up remaining as a dragon for the rest of the time, basically? And when it comes to this, I have a feeling that when it comes to the original 4 ninja, I don't think this change is going to be permanent, and the ninja will be able to find a way to undo it, and they'll be able to turn back into humans. Mainly because I just think that would be a pretty weird way for them to end the season, especially if the idea is that when it comes to Crystalized, this is going to be like some kind of big conclusion to a lot of stuff, especially with 2023 apparently having a new series. And so just, again, keeping the original 4 ninja as this massive 4-headed golden dragon, again, I think that would be kind of weird, honestly, for a way to end off the whole situation. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. There's definitely a lot of really interesting things to take a look at when it comes to the potentials for Part 2 of Crystalized, and potentially anything that I say during this video could either end up being proven right or wrong during Part 2 of Crystalized. We'll just have to wait and see. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So tell me down below, what do you guys think? What are some of your guys' predictions for Part 2 of Crystalized? Tell me down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Later, guys. This is Dimension Master Studios, signing off.